This is SoundNotion, the weekly podcast for new music and music news. I'm Patrick Gulo.
I'm Sam Merciers.
I'm Nate Blayton.
And I'm Dave McDonald. We are back. Happy New Year, everyone. I hope you all had a lovely break.
Happy New Year.
Yes. Anybody have any good New Year's resolutions that they'd like to share? Do you guys do New Year's resolutions?
Oh yeah.
I gave up.
Why did
I'm going to try and...
What do you got, Sam?
I'm going to try to gain weight and start smoking.
You're gonna restore balance in the world in that way by this could be a thing, like you could absorb everyone else's bad habits.
There it is.
Is that a thing? Can we make that a thing? That should be a website where you can like connect with people who want to absorb your bad habits. It's a startup.
Usually people get a head start on that during the holiday season already, so you might already be in a good position.
Yeah. I think over the Christmas holiday, I was trying to get all my drinking and disc golfing out of the way for the entire year, I think.
Yeah.
How did you do? Do you think you got it, or just a valiant attempt? I guess we'll find out.
I played a lot of disc golf and drank a lot, so we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I did one of those, and I'll let you use your imagination and figure out which one it was. By taking 2 weeks off at this time of year, one of the things that we miss out on, for better or worse, and I tend to think for better, is everyone's like end of year lists. So we missed one of these stories that happened kind of right after we took our break. It's from the New York Times Magazine. They've done this maybe 5 years or so in a row. It's called The Music They Made. And it's not an article. It's not, despite the fact that it's made by the New York Times Magazine, it is a montage, a video montage thing that they put on their site. And it is a kind of summation of the great musicians that passed away during the past year. And you see, a picture of them and their dates, and you hear a little excerpt of, the one or two songs that they were super famous for. And it was pointed out a few years ago by a blogger named Lisa Hirsch, who writes The Iron Tongue of Midnight, which you should read. And Lisa, if you watch or listen to this show, thank you for changing the background on your site. But...
Okay.
That's enough web design critique from Dave for today. But she pointed out that there has not been any classical musicians really in these ever in the 5 years that they've been doing them. And we've lost some pretty important classical musicians in the last 5 years, not least of which this last year. Both Elliot Carter and Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau passed away. And neither of them were included in. It's a pretty extensive list. It's not a short list of people that are in this New York Times Magazine.
And the thing to note about those two guys is it's not like they stopped producing in the 60s and have just been cruising, Those guys were both doing it until the very end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
Right.
Yeah, girl. So... This is a weird episode for our first of the year. So a lot of people
way too relaxed.
A lot of people went out of their way to point this out again. Not least of which were Alex Ross, Lisa Hirsch again, and Rob Deemer. And because Alex Ross is a writer for the New Yorker, he has a little bit more access to these people and is more likely to get a response when he complains about things. And he actually had a dialogue, might not be the right word, but he had a conversation not only with an editor of the Times Magazine, Hugo Lindgren, I should say the editor of the Times Magazine, on Twitter, who said that classical music lends itself less to the montage approach. Which is weird, because I don't think any music lends itself to the montage approach. And if it does, it's probably terrible music, right? If it's something that you can take a 10-second excerpt of and not change anything about the music, it's probably not very good, right?
Right. And yeah.
Go ahead, Nate.
To me, that sounds like to not be able to take a 10-second excerpt means that like you wouldn't recognize it from that small clip, which to me sounds like this person doesn't think that classical music is recognizable or like has traits that could distinguish it between different pieces by different composers.
Yeah, I feel like I'm always hearing classical music in montage.
Right.
Yeah. To me, it's like the person making the montage doesn't have any technique, because if you're going to find music that can be folded into background music for other montage audio clips, you're going to more likely find it in classical music than anything else.
Yeah.
I don't know. We should play a clip from the montage song from Team America. But, I mean, there's...
America! Bleep, yeah!
Thanks, Sam. So there's been a lot of back and forth, and there was also a later update from Alex Ross on his blog. He was in communication with the editor of The Collage, specifically, William Ferguson, and William Ferguson then went and kind of responded to Alex Ross's critique on the New York Times Magazine blog. And I don't know, how did you guys feel like he adequately defended the collage as it was?
No. But I'm of two
Can you
minds
expand
about it.
on that, Sam?
I'm of
As
two
if we
minds.
were on some kind of talk show.
I'm of two minds about that, because on the one hand, they can do whatever the hell they want because all they're trying to do is make the readers happy and keep their revenues up.
Sure.
And
Well,
if
that
they
doesn't
think-
necessarily mean they can do whatever they want. They have to take those
Yeah,
things
it
into
does.
consideration. Well, I'm saying they can do what they want, but those factors mean that they can't do whatever they want.
Well, what is it? The 0.001% of the population that cares is going to rise up and put them out of business for not including classical music? So I think they can do whatever they want from that point of view. However, in his one of his back and forths with Alex Ross, this guy Ferguson, is that his name? I got
Ferguson's
that right?
the guy that made... So there are two guys that Ross talked with. He talked to the editor of the magazine as a whole and the editor that put together this montage.
Right.
And William
So this is
Ferguson is the guy that did the montage.
This is a quote from Ferguson. I'm getting this from Rob Deemer's article. The unspoken and rather obvious, if you ask me, criterion to inclusion in these are artists who have affected popular culture. Okay, so if he's not going to say... He should have said, it's my montage and I can do whatever the hell I want, and I think this is what our readers want to see. I'm fine. Because he's not pretending to be all-inclusive or anything like that. But take...
He had some
Alex
weird...
Ross.
Yeah, go ahead.
Alex Ross points out that he does include some like very, very obscure indie/punk people that probably are known about as well as, well, they're not very well known.
Olivia Tremor Control is totally not that underground.
Right. But he doesn't include, here's my one example that proves
He
that
includes
reasoning
Rashid Ali, who's like a weird jazz musician.
Yeah. And here's the one thing that he did that proves that reasoning is incorrect. He left off Marvin Hamlish.
Yes.
Anyone over 30, and probably most people all the way down to teenagers, if you play the James Bond song he did, they're going to know it.
Which
That is
James Bond
super
song did he do?
iconic. What's that?
Which James Bond song did he do?
Nobody Does It Better? Is that the name of the song?
I think
that's the hook.
so. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, everybody knows that,
Right.
If you've ever watched TBS on a holiday weekend and they're running a Bond marathon or whatever, everybody knows that song. How can you say that Marvin Hamlish is not mainstream and affect popular culture? That's just crap. His
Well, that's the
reasoning
problem
is
with
crap,
making
and he's
these-
just trying to figure out a way to defend himself.
That's the problem with making these things in the first place. And Rob
I
should
was
know.
going to say, exactly. It's exactly what I was going to go to.
Love you, Rob.
If anyone should know,
So speaking of Rob, he actually made a great observation in response to that block quote that Sam was reading from earlier, that this is self-fulfilling prophecy. If you say this is not a mainstream thing that hasn't had anything to do with popular culture and then don't include it in your popular culture magazine, I wonder why it's not included in popular culture, because you don't write about it in your popular magazine. Right?
Exactly.
I mean...
Hal David is also not included.
Yeah, I was going to say
included.
Hal David is another one of these big dudes.
Like
How much?
You play any of those isn't it Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head one? Hal David?
I don't know. He's one
I
of
think
the
so.
huge songwriters of the 20th century.
I mean, even young people in this country would recognize a huge portion of Hal David's output just because it's still very permeating in modern culture.
Yeah.
So anyway,
So the point is, William Ferguson is wrong.
that's right. I thought we were going to
Wrong.
say
Coming out and saying it.
Yeah.
I
I'm
thought
going
we
to
were
say it. I'm going to say he can pull his sponsorship of our show.
I thought we were working our way around to say that it's all Rob Deemer's fault since he's the one that's into making lists.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
because I'm sure, yeah, because lists started with Rob.
Music lists
Really?
started with Rob, so it's all Rob's fault.
No, don't you remember? Music List started in our first episode.
Oh, would it?
What?
Yeah, with Anthony Tomasini.
What was the list?
Man,
Don't you remember that?
no.
Like the greatest composers, top 10 greatest composers.
Oh, yeah.
Ah.
That was a great thing to start off with, actually.
Good times here at SoundNotion.
It's
We should
Time
say
for
that
nostalgia.
excluding pretty important people is not exclusively the purview of the New York Times Magazine. We're leaving off all kinds of important composers in the BBC Three, the classical radio station, BBC Radio 3, I should say, classical radio station in the UK. This seems weird to me that this makes it into a conversation like this, but Bob Shingleton over on An Overgrown Path blogged about this, and the initial, I guess, findings were made by a guy on a message board who apparently does this every year. He looks through all of the BBC's playlists, all of BBC Radio 3's playlists for the whole year, and finds composers, like kind of sees the distribution of which composers had kind of the best Radio 3 years. And not surprisingly, there's a lot of Dvorak.
Yeah.
A lot of Dvorak in this list.
What was it? There were like 23 different ring cycles worldwide going on this year.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so Alex Ross is in a completely different thing. This is another one of these things, yeah. Put together a list. He's writing about Wagner right now, and it's also the Wagner bicentennial year. And is that right? Bicentennial for Wagner? I think so.
I think so.
Anyway.
What am I, a music scholar or something?
Anyway, because of that, there's like way too many performances of the complete ring cycle going on this year, and he counted them up on his blog, and it's something in the 20s. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
That's great.
So there's a lot of that going around, but this guy lists some of the really important living composers, or until recently living composers, that didn't make it on the list. Some really important 20th century composers like Kurt Atterberg, Hans Eisler, Roy Harris, Theodor Kirchner, Chris Rouse, a lot of really important composers that are just totally ignored by this radio station that claims to represent classical little c classical music. I can't say that I'm totally surprised by this. I feel like expecting, and this is kind of the same you were talking about, that you can think of it in two ways. One, they have to do the things that the most people are going to like, but by only showing them the things that they like, they're not allowing their audience to discover whether or not they like Christopher Rouse's music, for example. So if Radio 3 is your only source of classical music, then maybe you need to, get an iPod or something. But you're not going to have the fuller picture of what music people are making. And I think that's true of anything, and that's why, that's one of the reasons that we do a show like this. This is not a show that would exist even on like cable access anywhere, because nobody would care, right? Yeah. There's not a big enough audience in any cable market for this. This is artisanal media. It is for a small audience of people. It's not designed for everybody. When you buy craft beer, it doesn't taste like Budweiser. Budweiser is made to appeal to the largest possible demographic of beer drinkers.
Great analogy, McDonald.
So
And Bud Light even more.
right. And that's not what this is for. It's not designed to appeal to everybody. That's what we have Katy Perry for that. This is designed to appeal to just a small group of people and be really good at that. And I mean, you could say the same thing about a lot of these composers. I don't think anybody is writing for this non-existent public, the general public that as we've talked about before isn't a real concept. I don't know. What do you guys think about BBC not playing any living composers?
I'm stuck trying to figure out what kind of beer SoundNotion would be.
SoundNotion homebrew.
There we
Oh my
go.
God, let's do that. Yeah, BBC. Listen,
It's Radio
I don't
3.
think you
It's
can- I
not the
don't-
whole of the BBC. We should be specific.
right. Well, was Radio 3 I think it was. They were the station that was all about the album Blatt thing they had found.
Yeah. The
Do you
bronze
remember that?
thing?
Yeah, like that never before.
Oh, they get all of those.
Right, but I mean, like I think.
But like people that listen to this kind of music get off on that kind of stuff.
Right, so that's what I'm saying is that, like, I mean, even something like that, they just go nuts over this small little piece by a composer everyone knows and not play anything by living composers. I mean, that's just what it is.
Well, and
I don't
that's
see
why
it changing.
But that's why you have things like, something like Counterstream Radio from the American Music Center. Like that's not going to be a radio station anywhere, a terrestrial radio station, because
You mean New Music USA?
yes, New Music USA. Thank
Get
you.
used to that.
Oh man, it's been like a year now, and I still. But Counterstream is not gonna be a terrestrial radio station anywhere, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be, and the internet allows for it to exist without competing with top 40 radio, because people that listen to that probably aren't that interested in top 40 radio. They're not competing for the same ears.
Yeah, I think that there's a good argument made overall. There's two articles by the guy, so I'm not going to sort through and find the quote, but making the point that, you could have an orchestra do a concert and put what he calls box office piece in there, a Beethoven or whatever, and then make a really conscious effort to reach out. And God, I'm laughing at myself having this conversation because it seems like I've said the same thing like 100 times already on the show. Mm-hmm. I don't think that having a show with Beethoven's Fifth Symphony is going to, the people who want to see that are going to go, and they're not going to not go because the Dave McDonald Concerto for Steel Pan is also on the concert. They might even dig it.
Hey, sometimes that happens though with concert programming.
What?
Especially big orchestras. If there's like one or two pieces that are unfamiliar, they'll get less of a turnout, and that often happens, I would say. I mean, if there's like if it's like Beethoven 9, well, I mean, then nothing else would be on the concert if it's Beethoven 9, I guess. But I don't know, something like some heavy hitter warhorse piece. Like then you can be it's okay. You can get something new on the program, or you can have an entire program of new stuff and say, hey, this is a new program.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it's a moderately popular piece and you have two new pieces on it, then that's, I don't know. Sometimes those are tough.
I don't know. Another end of year.
I don't know.
I mean, yeah, we see it all the time. Is it the best programming decision? I think that can be debatable.
Right.
I mean, I don't like to think of albums or concert programs as just like a collection of things that are there because those are the things that we decided to throw together. So you have to be, I think, a little bit more careful about putting things together that make sense together and kind of make a unified artistic statement of some kind. That sounds really douchey, but you know what I mean. What?
Like the
We're-
Contact series.
Sure. What were you gonna say,
Oh,
Nate?
I was gonna say, I mean, that's what albums are. That's what concerts are supposed to be. I think, yeah, it's
Right.
not douchey.
Okay.
I think that's what albums used to be. Concept albums.
Well,
No one's
now
making
now
one.
now albums are kind of disintegrating with digital distribution, but that's another conversation for perhaps another week.
So do you guys ever wonder whether or not, like, on SoundNotion 980, we'll be like talking about, man, I went to the symphony the other day and it was another Mason Bates show. Like, come on. Haven't we heard enough Mason Bates now? Let's have something new.
I think that would have to be like SoundNotion, 40,080.
Right.
Oh, there's an episode title. SoundNotion 40,000.
That would be a really confusing episode title.
Right.
SoundNotion 98 is SoundNotion 40,000.
Another end of year article, and I guess people just I would say that people just can't help themselves from writing these, but I also don't know what else they would write about. Because there's not really anything that's going on right now. All the orchestras are playing their holiday pops, and not a lot of, even Beethoven gets left out this time of year. So
They're not playing real music.
Right. They're playing the music
did a
that
new
the
arrangement
people love.
for orchestra of Frosty the Snowman this year.
Right. They're playing their Leroy Anderson sleigh rides right now, and people
Right.
are
Hey, man.
digging it. That's a great.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that's what they're doing.
I think Dave
they're
and I
occupied.
both have a special connection because the clarinet parts on that piece are just awesome, and then Dave gets to do the horse thing.
The horse thing.
Right. That's right. So another one of these end of year articles is from Deceptive Cadence, and we've talked all fall and back into the summer about all of the orchestra crazy business labor crap that's going on this season that our friend Drew McManus has called the season of discontent. And Deceptive Cadence wonders whether this is, as the title of their article says, whether orchestras really hit the wall in 2012. What do you think? You guys think orchestras really hit the wall this year?
There's a lot of publicity about orchestras hitting the wall.
Sure. So you think it's an observation bias?
I think some of it is an observation, yeah. And I think Drew spoke to that a little bit, didn't he?
Yeah, last time he was on the show, this is something I asked him, whether there are more of these or whether we're just paying more attention to them. And he said it was probably a little of both. But I think the question is, are we going to continue to see these? Are these things going to just ramp up more or less indefinitely until enough organizations have to fold because of them, that we're just not going to have these organizations anymore?
It's possible that before the orchestras fold, we might see something like the entire orchestra model being revamped.
Yeah, I don't think orchestras are going to go away.
And
I think it might be more on a whole, not to see everything go away, but as something like fewer performances, less administrative positions, if possible. But I don't know, everything going away, I don't really see that happen.
I mean, I feel like we're seeing some of that transition happen already with different, like, so much more of a focus of chamber groups doing outreach concerts and like chamber groups doing administrative stuff and working with orchestras in different ways. Maybe people will start to, like, that knowledge will just kind of accumulate, and hopefully we'll start working our way out of this instead of going further into a crash or whatever.
Tell you what, it's a good time to start a string quartet.
Yeah.
Yeah, there aren't enough of those.
Well,
Okay, string quartet may be a bad example.
No amount of reorganization, if you're talking about having an orchestra, no amount of reorganization is going to change the fact that it's a difficult model to support, considering how many extremely well-trained people have to get paid to make it happen. If you're talking about a top-tier orchestra, that's not going to switch, and The line in the article says the funding structure for orchestras has always been problematic, and that's another time when I'm like, oh, are we going to talk about this again? Well, yes, it's problematic.
So I think this is a thing that comes up a lot in these articles. We have a much more thorough understanding, and we still are not, experts in this, of how orchestras, work in the work sense of the word, how the business runs than a lot of other people. And in fact, Drew McManus pointed this out on his blog this week, that he wrote a few articles about orchestra governance, how the organizations themselves are run, and like what the titles are that you're reading about in the local newspaper about your local orchestra, what those mean, what those people do, because a lot of people don't understand how these organizations are run. If you told people that ticket sales don't cover even half of most orchestras' annual budgets, they would be, I think, very surprised. And he says when these articles spike about orchestra labor disputes, these old articles that he wrote in his archives get a lot more hits because people are trying to figure out, what these people do. So I hesitate to criticize this kind of writing for that, because most people don't know this stuff that we think of as pretty, general knowledge.
The frustration I was expressing is over having to talk about it again, because there's nothing new to say. I feel like I'm repeating myself.
We don't have to talk about it, so let's not.
Well, there is one interesting quote that I don't think I've really heard it put this way so clearly. He's quoting some Bruce Ridge, who leads the International Conference of Symphony and Opera Musicians.
Sure.
He says the question really to be asked is not why some orchestras have had difficulty, but rather why are some orchestras doing so well, which is true. We focus a lot, because it seems like news, on orchestras that are having lockouts and stuff like that. But some orchestras are doing well.
And I will also say that some orchestras have been able to turn it around. Yep. I like to talk about the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra because it's my hometown. And just, 10, 15 years ago, they were in these same troubles. They were on strike, and they were, taking pay cuts, and they were having horrible business problems, meeting their payroll and everything. They shortened the season. They cut back on players, all kinds of things that you do to save money. And now they're back, and they're really successful. They just did their first European tour in like 20 years, or 15 or 20 years this last year. And just a couple of weeks ago, they signed a new contract with no drama with their music director, David Robertson. And back in the fall, they signed a contract a full year before their current contract was going to expire with the orchestra musicians. So, and that was, in the span of 10 or 15 years, they've gone from being extremely dysfunctional to extremely functional and successful. So it's possible to turn these things around, and you have to figure out what those guys did right, what Toronto's doing right, to fix these problems. And sometimes it's hard to kind of put your finger on, I guess. Otherwise, if it was obvious, then everybody would be doing it.
Yep.
I don't know.
But there is some good news in the music world.
What's that?
Steinway is not going to have to sell itself.
Well, yet.
Yeah. Well, it seems like we've covered this once before, and Steinway over the past year has taken a lot of steps towards, financial solvency. Lots of cost-cutting measures, and they seem to be working. They've been able to back away from, we got to sell. Now they're still planning on selling their showroom, with which
That's
they
a done
lease
deal,
in a building. And what's that?
That's pretty much a done deal.
Yeah. But they were talking about selling off their band instrument division, and I didn't realize this. I looked that up this morning, and I don't have the link open right now, but man, they own a lot Conn-Selmer, which they own Conn-Selmer, which
Really?
Conn-Selmer is like Armstrong and
Wow.
I mean, just tons of band instrument companies. They also own, I think it was Ludwig and somebody else for percussion. They own tons of
Wow.
stuff in the band instrument world, which I didn't realize.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah. So selling that off would have been,
I don't understand to whom they would sell it.
I don't know, but it would have been
nobody
a big
else
sell.
is in that business, like at that scale. It means
That's not
Yamaha,
true.
I guess.
Still,
Yeah.
It's like Conn-Selmer and Yamaha and everybody else.
Well,
right?
probably some big, foreign investment firm would have purchased them.
Sure.
yeah. You
and-
look at the stock price, and it's like some hello company.
Bain Capital is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Who owns Guitar Center, by the way?
Yeah. That's
that
what I'm
right?
saying. That's what I'm going for. You
And
could
there's a
go to
Guitar
your
Center
local
coming-
Guitar Center and buy your $8 delay pedal and your $108,000 Steinway Grand.
That's right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
There's a Guitar Center coming to Lansing, by the way.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Lucky you.
Well, I'm just hoping that I don't care about anybody else except Elderly Music. I hope Elderly Music doesn't take a hit because of this.
Yeah. The premier folk music for the Midwest.
Yeah, I mean, if you want, they sell like electric stuff. This is a local plug. If you
Yeah.
are interested in acoustic guitar, banjo, mandolin, anything like that doesn't have amplification and has strings, Elderly Music is the place to go.
Yeah. Even for electric guitars and basses.
Yeah.
And they've got a
They
whole
do,
amp.
absolutely. But I would like when people come into the shop and they're looking for a place to buy banjo accessories or whatever. I know Elderly Music has it.
Right.
Well, while functional orchestras and Steinway and Sons and Elliott Carter may be going out of style, you know what's not going out of style anytime soon?
What's that?
Hey, what's
Dave?
that? What's that?
Spotify.
Hey.
Digital music streaming from the good folks at Spotify. We've talked about this a lot.
Yes.
Perhaps some would say too much.
So,
Well, we want to talk about music dispersion, in the modern era, and right now Spotify is the number one thing going in that arena.
Well, except for all the digital download sales from Amazon and
Right, but
iTunes.
we're talking about things that don't operate on that model.
Sure. They're the big in the US anyway, they're the big new model system. They're also huge in Europe where they were founded. But there are a lot of problems with all of these digital services. I feel like we never really solved the problem with the last one before we moved on to this one, of metadata going along with classical music. So if you're not familiar with the idea of metadata, it is all of the data that's about the data. So the data itself is the song, the recording, and then the metadata is all of the information that you know about the recording. So the title, the artist, the album, the track number, all those other things are the metadata. And one thing that is often left out of that, as I just did, see, that was a little...
right.
That's the thing.
Right. I gotcha.
Right? Is the composer, right? And when you buy a track on iTunes, or heaven forbid you have physical media that you rip to your computer and store in iTunes or some other library, whatever, you can edit the metadata. You can say, well, this is not how I like my track titles to be listed. And you can change it. That's not true on Spotify. And Spotify, unlike iTunes, does not have a field for composer. In iTunes, it's not shown by default, but you can check a little box and it'll show you who the composer was of any recording that you have. And I say song because that's what Spotify calls everything. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony is a playlist of 5 songs. So, that is what it is. But it's really hard to find music by a particular composer because you can't search for the composer's name because it's not attached to the track. Sonata in F by the whatever pianist and put in an album doesn't mean anything.
I've heard that one.
No.
That's a really great song.
Right?
Yeah.
Symphony number 2 by the Seattle Symphony is not a
one,
useful metadata. You guys know Symphony 2, right? That's
Yeah,
a good song.
Man, I love it.
It's a good tune.
Song. Good song.
Man, I can't find the quote right now, but the guy is the Spotify guy was talking about. It's how we can't do it because of this. And his example was like, if we put the composer in for a Lady Gaga song, then that person's name would show up and Lady Gaga's name wouldn't show up. And I can't remember the exact structure of the quote, but to me it says, let me translate what the guy was saying. I have absolutely zero idea how classical music works or how people that enjoy classical music think about the music that they enjoy.
Right.
That's what he's saying.
Right. And yeah,
he or she is saying.
Because they're different things. They're not the same thing. It's not that I don't want to know who's performing the track. It's not that I want to know who wrote the track instead of who's performing it. It's that I want to know who wrote the track in addition to who is performing it.
Let me ask you this.
I would be exactly as frustrated if I knew that this was only the Debussy string quartet and I didn't know who was performing it. That would be exactly as frustrating as only knowing that it was a string quartet by the Arditi string quartet or whatever.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Now, do you think it's in the best interests of a record label to not say who the composer of a song is if the artist did not create that material?
What?
In pop music venues?
Yes. Because it would give less publicity, less focus on the actual artist that they're trying to make money off of. So if someone is seeing John Smith over all of these songs through all of these artists on a label, that might look like, who the hell is this John Smith person? Yeah. And why haven't I heard of them before?
Which, for talking about and learning more about music, is like super valuable. Like, I would love to know who that is.
Right. Mm-hmm. But it might not be in the best interest of the label because it would just make them look like, hey, we're using this guy to have him write all our songs. And
I think a lot of people that listen to popular
the image
music
away from the pop icon, for sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
A lot of people that listen to popular music probably don't even understand that the person singing it is not the person that wrote the song.
Right.
I think that's a common misconception, and it hasn't always been the case. Earlier in the show, we talked about Hal David and Marvin Hamlish. Like, people know who they are, and people today have no idea who wrote any of the songs that Katy Perry sings, right?
Actually, Katy Perry writes a lot of her. She actually writes songs for people.
Bad example.
And that's the other thing that I love to see when I know who the composer is. It's like this pop star is doing their own thing. This is actually them being.
Like, I don't know the name of the song, but what's her name? The first American Idol winner, Kelly Clarkson. Like, one of her biggest hits, and I can't remember the name of it, was written by Katy Perry. And I don't remember how I came by that information, but I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah.
And if that information wrong, I'm not asking for Spotify to put it like as the headline,
Yeah.
Do whatever you think you need to do to sell your stuff, but have the composer be a part of the metadata somewhere,
Yeah.
Right.
Just so that it's searchable.
So that it's searchable.
Right.
And then even in the pop music arena, like right now, if I could go to Spotify and see every song that's been composed by Katy Perry that's on there, that to me would be interesting, not because I'm a huge Katy Perry fan, but just to see, like, she came late to this idea of being like the pop star, and she actually wrote a lot of songs for other people. That's interesting.
I don't think that everybody that uses Spotify to listen to music is doing so quite as scholarly as you might, though.
Right, but one of the comments on somebody's article about it, I can't remember, says, they're a programmer and they're saying, adding this feature is not like rocket surgery. From a programming perspective, it's not hard in the slightest.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So why wouldn't they do it?
Because they don't understand.
Well, and I'm with Rob and everybody else. We need to encourage ourselves and our dozens of fans.
Write your congressman.
To write Spotify. We're going to have a link to the Spotify, I guess you might call it the Spotify bitch column, where you can go and express your disconcern with Spotify's metadata.
It was a Rob Deemer week, wasn't it?
I know. We had a lot of Rob on the show. So thank you for giving us your content, Rob.
Yes.
I think it's time. Is it time to wrap up the show? We don't have a pick of the week again because we don't have a guest, and we're if you missed this the last time we did this, we're starting a new. Sam, are you gonna?
I've got it.
What are you gonna? I don't understand what you're gonna do here.
I'm gonna play an excerpt.
Oh,
and
okay.
Okay.
What I thought I was doing one.
Well,
I thought you were going to go into the microphone and say deep cut.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were doing too.
I'll set it up next time. I'll have to run some effects.
We don't need a deep cut.
I'll need to give myself a deep, resonant Rush Limbaugh kind of
Deep cuts.
voice.
Right.
And getting this voice to sound low and rumbly is going to be some hardcore audio process.
Right.
So for this week, Dave, why don't you do it? Do you have an example of the piece pulled up?
I sure do, Sam.
All right. Well, it's all you, baby.
All right. So deep cuts is going to be our thing when we don't have a usual pick of the week, and it's just going to be something that we think is pretty cool that you may have missed, that maybe a composer or a performer but maybe not their most their top hit. This is a piece by Lou Harrison called Fugue for Percussion, and I have always been a great fan of imitative counterpoint. And I'm particularly enamored of contemporary composers who take on these Baroque and pre-Baroque contrapuntal forms. So this is a really interesting piece for percussion ensemble, mostly gamelan sounds, by Lou Harrison called Fugue for Percussion. So I should have warned you not to be confused by the flexitone. The flexitone is not the fugue subject. That would be a pretty awesome fugue subject, though. So you heard what was going on in there. Some really interesting stuff with the durations. There's kind of the feel of a prolation canon going on in the third entry, I think it is, where it's slow. The subject is slowed down a little bit. Anyway, it's really cool. I like it a lot. So check that out, Lou Harrison. He's actually I was going to say he probably didn't make it into the music they made when he passed away in 2003, but I don't think they were doing those yet at the New York Times Magazine. Mm-hmm. So that's going to do it for this week's SoundNotion. Do you guys have anything you want to share before we go?
I have no New Year's resolution, but
you have no New Year's resolution?
I have no New Year's resolutions.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys want to share.
Everybody write that down. Patrick Gulo, no New Year's resolution.
Yeah, that's my New Year's resolution.
He's perfect.
He did all right last year.
Right.
So
that's right. That's right.
He could resolve to be a little less perfect to make his friends feel not so bad they're around him.
That's right. Yeah. So we don't do a lot of cross promotion on SoundNotion TV, but I'm gonna this week because we have fun stuff going on. This week, Streamers and Punches will feature an interview with Golden Globe nominee Reinhold Heil, composer of the music for the film Cloud Atlas. And so that'll be out, I think, sometime this week. So that'll be their January show. And next week on SoundNotion, our guest will be the new manager of marketing and public relations for the Americas.
Don't say the name.
At Boozy and Hawks. I'm not gonna say who it is. Just that's the person's title that we'll have as our guest next week.
Yeah.
That's going to do it for this week's episode of SoundNotion. To read more about the topics that we covered or to comment on anything that we talked about on the show, you can go over to soundnotion.tv/SN and leave us a note. If you have a suggestion for, what kind of home brew would best represent SoundNotion in our craft beer analogy earlier, please share that with us. We've got a few suggestions from Karina in the chat room of Java Stout or Porter, so a morning kind of coffee beer kind of thing, or a Bloody Mary themed beer from Shorts Brewery, and those are good. If you have any others, send them our way. And we want to thank everybody who is watching live. You can do that every Sunday morning around 11 a.m. Eastern Time, barring any technical difficulties, at soundnotion.tv/live. And we're always happy when people take advantage of that, and we enjoy reading the chat room and having live viewers each week. You can also connect with us on Facebook or Twitter. We're at SoundNotion on Twitter as a group. I'm at Dave McDowell. Sam is at Housegoing. Nate is at Innate and Patrick is at Vox Shibuya. Did I say that right? Do I ever say that right?
You always say it right.
Okay. I'm never quite sure. You can also subscribe to this show on the iTunes Store or wherever finer podcasts are available. Be sure to subscribe to catch every episode. SoundNotion's introduction includes music by Patrick Gullo and video by Tyler Lab. Thanks again for watching, and we will see you back next week.